Hi, my name's Emma, and let's talk spooky stuff. Earlier in the week, I released my 100% spoiler-free review of Bly Manor, and today I'm back with the spoilers. I thought the best way to talk about this series and explain everything that you may have missed is to talk about the ghosts, since the story really is about the entanglement of these different ghost stories and what they really mean. I watched this series twice now, and if you saw my original review, you'll know that I thought it went off track, and then I realized why as it got back into the rhythm. And I feel like with a second viewing, you see it completely different because you see why all of those little crumbs were left along the way and what they really mean. In this video, I'm going to break down each ghost, what they mean, and of course, how this initiated the haunting of Bly Manor. If you don't know who I am, my name is Emma. I'm also known as Spookyastronauts here on YouTube. I do 2 videos every single week talking about horror movies and thrillers and giving you lots of recommendations for hidden gems. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, why not subscribe? And if you find this video helpful, please give it a like. Let's jump in, but I have to say first, spoiler alert, there are going to be major spoilers. If you have not seen the series, please go watch it first. This video is intended for people who have seen the series. It's about explaining the series, so please go see the magic and then you can come back here and we can wrap it all up. And with that being said, let's start with the most mysterious ghost that doesn't actually belong to Bly Manor. I wanted to start with Edmund because he is an exception to all of the other ghosts we see in Bly Manor. This is because he did not die there and his spirit is not kept within its parameters. Edmund's story is different because he is not the victim of the lady in the lake, and he is not a victim of her ripple effect. He is the regret and the heartache that haunts Dani for the choices she made. Edmund at first appears in jump scares, moments that show him physically as a lanky, tall man-like figure with fire in his glasses. In Ep 4, we find out who the mysterious man in the glasses is and what Dani has been haunted by. The ghost is that of her ex-fiance and childhood sweetheart, Edmund. Edmund and Dani's life were intertwined since they were children. Although they were always best friends, Edmund had no idea that Dani was hiding her own secret. Dani is gay, and after the pressure of the engagement party, she begins to crack, realizing her decision to marry him will ruin whatever chances she has of becoming her true self. In this episode, Edmund's mother tells Dani, "You need to put on your own oxygen mask before others," and Dani replies that Edmund has said the same thing. This is alluding to her finally having the strength to tell him the truth. Things boil over later when they go out for dinner and discuss wedding plans. Dani finally admits that she doesn't want to let others down, but she doesn't want to get married. After dinner, they continue their argument in the car, and as it heightens, Dani doesn't get the chance to reveal the truth before Edmund steps out of the car and is hit by oncoming traffic. The last thing Dani sees is his glasses lit up by the headlights. This image of him was burnt into her mind like that because of what she felt like she did to him. She was haunted by the guilt and heartbreak. Edmund was really Dani's ghost, the ghost of her guilt and the past haunting her. Later, she is given these same glasses that are cracked from the accident. She is given them by his mother, who refuses to hold on to them anymore. And so they followed her all the way to England, and every time she looked at herself, she was faced with the burden of what she felt like she did to him. I think we can all agree the faceless lady from the lake is the most terrifying ghost of the series, but in her story we realize she is a confused spirit in mourning. She is not to be feared but to be sympathized with. This is the ghost who started it all and holds the key of the haunting of Bly Manor. In the middle of the 17th century, 2 sisters lived together in Bly Manor, Viola and Perdita. Their father had passed, and in this time they needed a man to help them control their estate. A man called Arthur Lloyd came to meet the women, and although Perdita was the one who hoped to form a relationship, Viola swooped in and made a lasting impression. They soon got married, but Viola remained in control, and she soon gave birth to a baby girl named Elizabeth. After this, she noticed the attraction that still existed between her husband and her sister, but she was distracted by other problems. She became sick. As her sickness grew, she was told that she was to be kept away from her daughter, which made her frustrated and bitter. The doctor told the family that she only had months to live, but Viola was stubborn and held on for years. while her frustration grew and it turned into anger. She grew to resent her sister for being close to her daughter, and she also resented her for interacting with her husband in ways she couldn't. The tension was unbearable, and Viola grew so sick that she knew that she would never wear any of her prized items again. Thinking of her daughter and the only thing she had left to give her, she locked away all of her prized items into a trunk, asking her husband to keep the key and promising that it would only be given to Isabel, no one else. Perdita cared for Viola every day, but was only thanked in resentment. With no one around, Perdita put her hand over Viola so she could no longer breathe. After grieving for a short while, Viola's fears became a reality and her sister married her widowed husband. But the new couple's luck ran out when they fell into hardship. Perdita begged to sell the items that her sister had locked away in the trunk. It had been 6 years at this point and she was at her limit. But what she didn't know is that this whole time, Viola herself was tucked away in these items. After her grisly death, she awoke as a spirit in the trunk, much like a mummy in the tomb, awaiting for her daughter to turn of age to unlock the trunk and set her free. So when the years passed and she finally heard the key in the door, only to be met with her sister who killed her, her vengeful spirit killed in return. But she had no idea the ripple effect this would have on her time in purgatory. She thought she would be free and see her husband and her daughter. Instead, they moved from the manor. And because her husband was superstitious, he decided to dispose of the trunk where he found his second wife had died mysteriously. So Isabel and Arthur unknowingly threw the spirit of Viola into the lake to sink to the bottom. A final blow to her heart, breaking it forever. From the story we know, she was a stubborn woman. So now, at the bottom of the lake, she created her own gravity that would keep those who died on the property from ever moving on. Viola would wake each night, walk back to the manor in search for her daughter, only to be faced with an empty bed and the memories of being thrown away, and her heart would break all over again. Over time, she grew confused. Years had passed, and she began to forget. Anyone who got in her way would be taken by her ghost, held in her gravity, and stuck in purgatory at Bly Manor. This is where the plague doctor's ghosts come from, which we see earlier in the series, and I believe other nameless deaths like the soldier who Henry refers to as being his imaginary friend. After years, her face began to fade, just like her memory, and she was now a faceless spirit. She didn't know who she was looking for anymore. So anyone who fell into her path would be taken back to the lake, including the boy that Flora would later give a name and a face to, but also her sister, who still remained in the attic, who we see throughout the series as a faceless, moaning spirit who doesn't remember who she is nor what happened to her. Viola held the key to Bly Manor, and only in the final episode do we see Danny set her free, releasing them all, and cursing herself to be haunted by Viola for the rest of her life. Peter Quinn is by far the least likable ghost at Bly Manor. Peter worked with Uncle Henry Wingrave, but when he met the children's new au pair, Rebecca Jessel, he fell hard, and it wasn't long before he showed his true colors, trying to control her with verbal and emotional abuse. But even so, he still has a tragic past, one that insinuates the worst abuse to a child, which explains a lot about his pain and anger. And from this came a life of being destructive and hurting others. And this was the part of his past that crept up on him. His dream hopping revealed the moment where it all came to a point, when his mother and father conspired against him to tell Henry Wingrave about his shady past. Peter was blackmailed by his parents to steal from the Bly estate, but instead he made plans to run away with Rebecca Jessel. But what his true plans were, we will never know, because the very moment he was stealing the item, he was caught by a grieving spirit, one we come to know as Viola. She takes him by his neck into her gravity, drowning him in the lake. At first, his ghost is confused, the Wile E. Coyote effect, which I will talk about a little later. But he quickly realizes when he is told by Flora how it happened, and the doll he is holding drops through his hands. It's not long before he discovers how he can possess others, and with this newfound knowledge, he begins to mess with the living. But that's not where his story ends, because his ghost pulls both Miss Jessel and Hannah Gross into its orbit, which we will get to, because they deserve their own story to be told. Peter Quinn is a vengeful spirit. He was angry about his death and selfish both as a human and a ghost. Even with his troubling upbringing, the audiences will struggle to empathize with him, as he murders out of spite and to have control. Even as a ghost, he could not let go of these human emotions. Throughout the first episodes of this series, we see a mysterious lady in the lake. At first, this spirit seems to be ominous, but it's only later we learn her backstory and see her for what she really is. A woman in mourning over her own independence and her own lifeless body. Rebecca Jessel entered the series as an ambitious woman looking to get her foot in the door with Henry Wingrave. But to get close to his business, she decided to come on as Flora and Miles's au pair. As soon as she met Peter Quinn, she was locked by his charm. Quinn soon showed how controlling he was, and at first she stood up to him. She was hurt by what he did, but she took him back. And then later, when she learned that he had stolen from the manor, she was furious, especially because he left her without a word. But when he returned, his new secret made her forget her fury, as he revealed he was a ghost. Rebecca and Peter continued this toxic cycle throughout the series. He would shame her, he would downplay the abuse, and she would take him back. Even after his death, this continued. Peter, after learning how to possess someone and tuck them away, convinced Rebecca that they could be together if she would just let him in. Only then could he have full control instead of possessing her body for a hiccup of time. She agreed on these terms, but only if it made them equal. She wanted to save her lover and always be with him. So Peter tucked her away in a memory, and then the cycle continued. But this time, there was no coming back. Peter betrayed Rebecca one final time by abusing the power she gave him, taking control of her body and then making her drown herself in the lake. He took her life so she could never leave him, trapping her in the manor as a ghost. There's nothing quite like someone mourning their own death. And the scene where Rebecca breaks down after seeing her own lifeless body is nothing less than heartbreaking. She gave him everything, and time after time he abused her trust. And this is why later she works with Flora to save her from his schemes. Rebecca is the weeping lover who lost it all. This one I felt like was the most obvious from the start. The Bly Manor groundskeeper Hannah is always a little off, but it wasn't long before the cracks began to show, mind the pun. Hannah is the heart of the show. She is the baseline used as a moral compass. She calls things out, but also consoles those in need. Her ghost echoes the story of something most people fear, dying with regret and not living life to the full. In episode 5, her death is revealed. Miles, who was then possessed by Peter Quinn, lashes out at Hannah because of his frustration over being, well, dead. In a rage, he pushes her into the well. The very moment we meet Hannah in this series, she is already dead. In fact, this was the moment that she died. But the Wile E. Coyote effect is in full swing, and in episode 7, Quinn explains why she was able to appear like a human, why she was able to touch things and others. It's because, just like Wile E. Coyote, she didn't realize she was off the cliff until she looked down, or more appropriately, down in the well. And so she was left suspended in time, floating on as if nothing was wrong. And this is why she holds the cup, but she never drinks. You never see her eat, and she remarks in episode 2 that she hasn't been sleeping well or really at all. And of course, this explains the cracks on the wall, which turns out to be the crack at the bottom of the well where her body is laying. When we first meet Hannah in episode 1, she remarks that she was off somewhere else. She is the largest victim to dream hopping, and this is because of her denial of her own death. Hannah talks about Miss Jessel being in denial, but what she really means is herself. She is stuck. She is in denial. But somewhere in her subconscious she knew. This is why she lights candles, one for the children's parents, one for Rebecca Jessel, and one for herself. And unlike the others, hers does not flicker. It stands strong, as she appears as a human, not a ghost. Not quite yet. When Peter Quinn explains the Wile E. Coyote theory, that is when she realizes that her life is over, that her relationship with Owen the cook will forever be a lost love. she can never truly be with him and would regret that for as long as she haunts the grounds. And this is why when she dream hops, she returns to the moment she met Owen. It was the moment that her life changed. The moment she met the man she loved. And in this moment, she was human. Hannah Gross is the story of a ghost who was in love with a man and wanted so desperately to have the chance that she refused to believe her own death. Shock perhaps, or blissful ignorance. I would love to hear your theories about the different ghosts, and I really, really, really want to know who was the ghost you liked the most and who was the ghost you liked the least, because it kept changing for me, and every time I figured out more of the story, my emotions for each ghost would change. So I really would love to hear your theories, and especially who you liked the most and the least by the end of the series. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I did not include minor people who, like Henry, who disappeared for a moment and then came back. I included the ghost stories, and I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I do 2 videos every single week talking about horror movies and thrillers, giving you a lot of recommendations, and my 13 days of horror is coming up very shortly. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.